We are back with another episode with Sally Phu. Our last episode, we had quite good feedback from people saying that they wanted to hear more of our stories, especially around the topic of saying no and setting boundaries. So we decided to come back and then just share more stories of how we learned to say no to somebody. So welcome, Sally. Thank you for coming back.
Hey, thank you, Suzanne. Another fun conversation is gonna happen.
Yes, absolutely. So we're just talking about before we start recording that we want to share our before and after, how we used to not feel comfortable saying no to somebody, and then how we overcame that. So, Sal, you want to start us off with how you were before, and do you have an example that you can give us?
Yeah, I think for a lot of us, especially Asian American, we were raised with not saying it is not okay to say no. It is disrespectful, especially when we have a model that is our parents, and they don't really say no to their parents either. And I just remember that growing up, saying no has such consequences that my body actually gets nervous and started shaking before I even thought of saying no. So the natural response that I give when my parents ask me, "Hey Sally, go to school. Hey Sally, take more tutors. Hey Sally, do this sport." And I'll just like, "Okay, yes." And I remember, even though I didn't want to do it, I still did it anyways just to make them happy, number one. And number two is to avoid the consequences. So going into adulthood, I know that as I was growing into my teenage year, actually, I had a hard time saying no to people. And because I thought saying yes is a good thing and pleasing people is a good thing, right? So I would always just say yes to whoever that asked me for a favor. And that was fun. But when we all go into adulthood, we have responsibilities. It's not just all games anymore. We have our own growth that we need to do. And then we have our family. And especially after I had my daughter, I learned to say no a lot. And it started from my mom wanted to do a certain thing to my daughter. She was probably like 1 month old. And she's like, "Hey, let's give her this." And I was like, "No." And she's
How
like,
does she react?
obviously she was shocked. She's like, "Wait, did you just say no to me?" I mean, there has been many instances, but I remember because of my daughter, I still felt the fear and the nervousness and the anxiety running through my body when I said no, and maybe like sweat coming down my back. But I was like, "No." And then I waited for what was going to happen because my reason for saying no was so strong. I didn't want anything bad, or I didn't know
Mm.
it was good or bad, but I didn't want anything happen to this little one. So that was like some of my experiences of saying no.
You're right. It's like growing up, were you spanked or were you punished every time you said no to your parents? What was their reaction? I'm curious.
Okay, there's this story I want to share. My parents were big time networkers back in Vietnam. They owned businesses. So my dad would almost go out every night. And one time, him and my mom came home and they were so excited. My dad's like, "Hey, I got something good for you guys." And we all surrounded him. We're like, "What is it?" And he opened up. It was a container of worm.
Oh.
And yes, those fat, wiggly worm from the coconut tree, that's what they call it. And my siblings were like, "Ooh." I was like, "What?" And then, "Yeah, this is really good. You should eat it." And it's, I mean, they cooked. But then I was terrified of insects at that time. And the moment I saw that, I was like, "Oh no, oh no. No, I'm not going to eat that." And my dad was so upset. He was so angry, maybe because of
Mm,
alcohol too.
mm,
But he was so mad. He beat me with the bamboo stick. It went on for, I felt like hours, but it probably wasn't. And he dragged me out to the balcony. In Asia, we have this balcony facing out on the street, and I don't know what he was about to do. He dragged me out there, and all the maids in our house was like, "No, no." It was like a horrific experience. And my mom, I didn't remember what my mom did, but it ended up that I was just crying and not willing to eat any of those worms because I was
mm.
terrified. And then I went
Yeah.
to sleep upset, but I thought, "Oh, I deserved it." because I said no.
Interesting.
Yeah, and the next day when my dad went to visit my grandma and my uncles, told them what happened last night, and my uncle was like, "How could you do that? Did you know that your daughter is terrified of insects? How could you do that to her?" So my dad probably at that
Wow.
moment felt like, "What kind of dad am I? I don't even understand my own daughter," and then
Mm,
whooping her to the point where I actually got, like, really bad bruises and whatnot. So
wow.
my dad came home and asked me, "How are you? Are you okay?" And then he actually put, like, ointment on
Aw.
my butt area, right? So he put
Yeah.
it on, and I was like, "Hmm."
Oh my god.
Yeah, and he still tell us to this day that that was one of
Aw.
the incidents that he regretted in his life.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I wanna share something about that. Like, I was also spanked with a bamboo stake when I said no. For me, I was not a very good eater as a baby or as a child. I would always hold, like, the rice or the food in my mouth for, I don't know, I apparently my parents would tell me I would hold it for like 10, 15 minutes. I would just not swallow it. I don't know why. But I would always do that when I'm eating. So it's like they feel frustrated, obviously, but it's like that moment of conflict, right, between the parents and the child, and it's like I want to do what I want, and then they're trying to force you to eat, and that just creates that tension of the I'm not allowed to do whatever I want, and then we learn that as a child growing up, and there's consequences. Obviously, we get punished for it pretty badly sometimes, and I do get bruises, and they chase me around, with a bamboo stick. But it's just something, that I was talking to my mom actually this weekend. She was feeling bad about something that she did in the past. And I'm like, hey, it's just, behaviors that get passed down from one generation to another. It's really not a parent's fault. It's just what they learn from their parents. And, that feeling of, oh, my kid is telling me no. I don't know if that happens in your family, but it's like, you're not giving me face. I should be the one that you should respect for what I say because I'm the right one. I don't know if that's happened in your family, but it's just that feeling of you should respect me, and whatever I say, you cannot reject it, right? Because then they feel rejected almost. So it actually goes back to the insecurity that our parents would feel if a child would tell them no. Now understanding it, what happened. But yeah, going back to not being able to say no, I think that happens a lot in the Asian community. It's just that because we get punished, and then so growing up as adults, we learn to be people pleasers, and then kind of not want to cause that conflict, because whenever we said no as a child, it caused conflict and there was serious consequences. For me, one example was, my friends and I would go out to eat at a restaurant, and it would be like, their recommendation that they suggested the restaurant. And then, when we each get our food, and then they would ask me, say, how do you like your food? And I would be like, well, in my mind, I would be like, I don't really like it, but I don't want to hurt their feelings because they recommended the restaurant. So I would say like, oh yeah, this is pretty good. I kind of just left it at their very general, but kind of not sincere to myself. And that was the old me. It didn't feel good, obviously, because I felt like I would kind of be like lying, but
Mhm.
it's an awkward moment where they asked me about the food, and then it's like I just wasn't able to say the truth for some reason. And then now I learned to how to overcome that. But have you ever experienced something like that?
Yes. I have decided, I think last year or 2 years ago, I've decided my word of the year was, authenticity.
Mm,
And because of that, I committed to being as authentic as I could. I learned that there's a way of saying no in a really kind way. Because, like, for example, if your friend cook you food and you don't like it, or for me, I don't like it, I wouldn't be like, no, I don't like it. I would actually
yeah.
be like, why don't I like it? Because it's my
Mm,
opinion. If I don't
yeah.
like it, if I think it's not good, doesn't mean it's not good to other people. It's just my own
Right.
opinion. So I learned to give more constructive feedback. Like,
Mm,
it is a little too salty for me, but I'm
mm,
sure somebody else would like this dish.
yeah. Yeah. You touch on a key point that I love using, for me, because then it's just my opinion, right? and it's just personal, something that just expressing your own personal opinion, and it doesn't represent, everybody. And so that's two words that I learned that I love using when it's giving feedback or when I'm trying to express or learning to express my own opinions or feelings. Like, hey, this is just for me, or this is just my opinion. This is just how I feel. These are two words that I guess it could be a good tip or a good tool for our listeners if you want to practice on that authenticity. These two words for me, or just my personal opinion, really helps a lot to make the listener not feel offended.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
my daughter has no problem saying no. We are having a hard time getting her to say yes to things. And that pose a totally different challenge, right? I'm like, okay, we good. We have that down. She's not a people pleaser. She's not gonna tell you yes, but then she means no, right?
Yeah.
She still does that to me because she cares about me, obviously. But to any person, she's like, no. Can I have a hug? No. So now I think with the newer generation, or at least for my daughter, is how do I get her to say yes to things and not be afraid
Mm,
to a different group of consequences? Like, what if I say yes? What's gonna happen? Is it something good or something bad's
mm,
gonna happen? So it's just really interesting how we in our generation recognizing our conditioning and decided to shift. And I
yeah.
just feel like a lot of time there's no yes or no good or bad, right or wrong. It's just
Mm,
what is it at the moment? And I have to tell my daughter that a lot of time when she say no to me, I was like, could you give me a reason why?
mm,
And sometimes the reason is legit, and sometimes it's just like, seriously? But either way, as a mom, I would give her my thoughts like, well, maybe you can look at it that way. But if I
mm,
ask her second time and third time and she said no, I was like, okay, you can try
yeah.
next time. Yeah.
Wow.
Being
As
respectful.
as a receiver of the no, how do you receive that from your daughter?
Now, at first, she's like, no. I was like, what? What do you mean, no? I'm your mom. You gotta do what I tell you to do. And she's really strong. She's just like me, stubborn, and she's like, "I'm not about to back down." She's like, "Nope, nope, I'm not gonna do it." You cannot bribe her with food, treats, or toys, or anything. Sometimes I bribe her. Lately, I've been bribing her shopping, and she's like, "Okay." But it really depends on her mood too. I just felt like when she said no, it was like I got hit by a hammer, and I thought,
Mm,
"This girl just tell me no." And I recognizing my own child inside of me thinking like, "Oh, I could say no."
interesting.
Yes, it was like a realization that the consequences of saying no is actually not anything bad at all. It's you
Huh.
owning getting back your power.
Wow. That's awesome. It's like almost your daughter taught you that it's okay to say no, or
Mhm.
showed you that it's okay because you were the one receiving it, right?
Yes.
That's awesome. It reminds me of, thinking about, and I want us both to share that. How do we each learn to say no today as an adult, right? Thinking about what you said about your daughter is being on the receiving end of it. So I had this friend in university. Her name is Lynn, and I love her to death. She has very healthy boundaries. If she doesn't want to go out, she's like, no, I don't feel like going out. And then for me back then, it's like, oh, we're going out as a group of friends. Like, I feel like I should be going out with them, even though I was very tired and I had an exam probably the next day. But there was definitely a lot of FOMO inside of me. But she
Mhm.
was very clear with her boundaries, like, no, I don't feel like going. I'm just going to go home. And I always admire her for doing that. And she's very honest, with her own opinions of how she feels about the food, that we're sharing or anything like that. But being on the receiving end, it made me feel safe to be her friend. I know that I can trust her, right? Whatever feedback she gives me, if she wants it or if she doesn't want it, I know that it's truthful to her, and I don't have to kind of guess to say, oh, does she really want it? Or that guessing game has we don't have that with her. So just being on that receiving end, knowing that I have a friend who has very healthy boundaries like that feels actually good for the person receiving it. So I think that's one thing that I learned, even though it was hard for me to overcome my people pleasing. But I just want to share that when you're on the receiving end, it actually feels very safe for the other person.
Yeah. I agree with you. You can trust that
Yeah.
person's opinion. 100%.
Yeah, exactly. And then if they do say something that's positive, it's like, oh, that feels even better because it's truthful, right? Yeah.
I have to agree with you. When our daughter likes something and she say yes to it, we're like, "Whoa, we're
Yeah.
so excited," and we do more of that.
Yeah,
She's
exactly.
conditioning us. She's training us. I'm telling you, my daughter, sometimes I go to her for advice, and it's silly to say that, but because her point of view in the world is so pure that sometimes the solutions that she comes up with is very creative. As an
Wow.
adult, sometimes we're so stuck with the energy that we've been having through
Yeah.
work, relationship, and dealing with other people. With them, it's just they're in their own world and they think about what is the
Mm,
best for me right now, and they give it to you.
wow. Yeah. Wow. I'm curious, where she learned that?
I don't know. She probably learned it from me without me thinking, without me realizing what I was doing because I
Mm,
was unconscious, right? But
yeah.
with her watching, it's like, oh, my mom say no. My mom tell people this. My mom give really good advice because there are times that she say things and then I would be able to break it down for her and explain. And she's like,
Mm.
oh, okay. So at one point, she was younger, maybe 6. She's like asking me a question, and I said, I don't know, honey. Let's find out. And she's like, what? You know everything. I was like, no, I don't know everything. So I think for me, being truthful, being honest with her, instead of trying to make up some
Mm.
stories to tell her off so she doesn't bother me, I actually pause and think about it. Yeah, that's a really good question. Let's find out.
So how did you learn to say no to somebody as an adult then, to show your daughter that way?
Oh my gosh, I think she watched me doing that to my mom. Because we have our 4 generations living in a household, and that is powerful because you can really see, like, for her, right? She can see what her last 3 generation did to
Interesting.
each other, and then she is very observant, and I really applaud her for that. She would watch, and sometimes she's like, "Mama, do you know that you did this when you were watching a movie?" She would point out, "Oh,
Wow.
you have facial expressions," and she loved watching me when I watch, like, manga anime, because I would just follow the animations, and then she would be like, "Oh, Papa, grandma said this to you, and you responded with that. Is that the right way to respond?" And
Interesting.
honestly, as an adult, I don't even know that's what I was doing, but she
Wow.
deciphered the conversations and the emotion that was happening and give it to me,
Wow. Wow.
right?
She's like your mirror, she's always observing you.
Like, crap.
It's like Sally's gotta be on her A game with her daughter.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, there's a lot of time that I have to be in my A game, but you know what's so interesting is that I feel so safe around her, and she
Mm,
feels so safe with me that we don't act the way we do with each other around other people.
that's awesome. Do you feel like she puts on any people pleasing with other people than you?
She tried
Or
to
any
please
different
my
ways?
mom, and
Interesting.
recently, yesterday, something that my mom did to her that she did to me when I was growing up, I was like, "Oh, no, I need to talk to her because it's the same behavior," right? But my daughter has this thing where I will not trust you until you prove it to me.
Mm, yeah.
Yeah, so she feels the love. She knows that people around her love her, but she really doesn't feel the need to please anybody. If she doesn't
Mm,
like any food that we cook, she has no
yeah.
problem telling us no. And I said, if you don't want to eat what we cook, you got to figure out your own food. And she
Mhm.
did. She would cook like ramen noodle or make her own sandwich, things like that. And as a mom, we're like, that's not healthy. There's no nutritional value. And I used to scold her for that. But then I realized, wait, I give her the power to choose and
Mm,
take care of herself. So I should let her accept the consequences.
mhm.
I
Yeah.
explained to her, hey, honey, the food you chose, the peanut butter sandwich you have, full of sugar, carbs, no protein, is not good for you. But if you decide to eat it, I would like you to take note on how you feel before and how you
Wow.
feel after. And it is
Mm,
not what something that you tell her one time and she's gonna get it. No, you
Right.
have to repeat until one day something hit her and her body feels the consequences of the food she eats, and she's like, "Yeah, no, I'm not eating that anymore."
Wow. That goes into the power of your patience and you being authentic to yourself and not forcing kind of your point of views on her because you feel offended that she's not following the pack. That speaks volume to you, Sally. I'm proud of you.
Yeah, it wasn't easy. At first, it was, I think it has been years where we were forcing our own ideas and belief on her.
Mm.
And for me, I didn't see her as happy as she could be, as thriving, because she would do what we asked her to do with, what do you call it, like pouting.
Uh-huh.
I mean, it's normal, right? To most people, oh, it's okay for kids to complain and pout. Yes, I understand, but I would like to for her to have more happiness than more sadness in her days.
And so that became almost like your reason of why you want to let go of your feeling of feeling offended when she said no.
Absolutely.
That's
It's
awesome.
because as
Yeah.
moms, we take things so personally. If she behaves
Yeah.
badly, it's my fault. If she behaves well, it's my
Mm.
accomplishment. If she does this to other people, if she does everything is so personal to a mom because we're the one who hand raised that. And
Wow.
nobody can tell you that, oh no, it's her. She's growing to a little person and let it be. And as a mom, we hear that, but we don't accept it.
I love that. I love that. It made me think of, because I was thinking before we started this podcast, I'm like, how did I make that shift from having difficulty saying no to now, like, I want to be truthful to myself and I don't want to lie to myself, right? And for me, the reason was self love. And I love that you gave the example of you want your daughter to be happy and not be in a place of unhappy because you feel like you're responsible for her upbringing, right? And it reminded me of when I was preparing for this episode. I'm like, what is self love? And I heard this analogy from Matthew Hussey, relationship coach that I love. And like self love is thinking about how you would love your own children, or if you have a pet, or if you don't have children, right? The reason you love on them is not because of how smart they are, how tall they are, how pretty they are. It's really just because they're your child or they're your pet, right? That's like the level of unconditional love, even though they're saying no to your face and you feel offended, but you still have to love on them anyways. You still have to feed them, you still have to take care of them. And I love his analogy that he explains that self-love is just like how you would love your daughter or your children or your pets, but you apply that same kind of love to yourself because you were given this human of yours at birth, that you are the only person to take care of this human. You need to feed it, you need to make it grow, you need to love on it. And so if we apply that same analogy of you don't want your daughter, Sally, to be unhappy, but then somehow we allow ourselves to be unhappy by being untruthful to ourselves. And so if we just apply the same analogies, like, well, shit, like I'm allowing myself to lie to myself and almost like holding back my own feelings by saying, something that would please the other person, that would feel good, that we think would feel good to the other person's ear. But really, truthfully, what we said before is like, it actually doesn't sound very good to the other person's ear. Like they can hear your intention if you're being truthful or not. And it's like, I would kind of guess, oh, if something was off or something's not truthful, like it would kind of feel like I'm playing a guessing game with my friend, right?
Mhm.
So actually that brought up really good analogies. I just want to share that self-love, and that was what taught me to be truthful to myself. And now I feel like, when somebody asks me for any feedback, is I don't even want to say anything that's untruthful to myself. It's like once I learned how to love myself, it's like, no, I'm just gonna say it as it is. But like you said, there are different ways to give feedback. There's this like sandwich way to give feedback. It's like looking for one good thing and then one thing to improve on and then end with the good thing, right? It's like practicing that muscle to look for the good things. Say, for example, if my friend were to ask me, how do I like my plate of food that I ordered? It's like, well, I would look for, oh, maybe the tomato is perfectly grilled. The rice is a little bit, too salty. But yeah, overall, it's a pretty good plate or something. Just use that muscle to look for the good things, even though there must be something good from it. Even like, oh, the greens are really green, something like that, just so that it's something positive that you can compliment on. but then add on, to the area that, you talk about the constructive feedback where, areas that they can improve on. So yeah, I just wanted to share like how I overcame my people pleasing just because I don't want to be untruthful to myself anymore.
Mhm.
What
Yeah.
about you?
I think on a deeper level as well is saying no to people is actually an easy way off, right? But if you really want to improve yourself and do that self improvement, when you want to say no, you kind of gotta pause and think about why you say no, right?
Mm,
I think a lot of time, if we haven't healed ourselves, we would just say yes, for example, to anybody asking
yes.
for our help, even though our plate is full. And we thought that, oh, they're not going to like me if I say no. So we think about the shame and the outside coming in when we say no to people, right? Shame and lose face and maybe not good connection anymore. So that's shame. The other feeling that we might get is when we say no is guilt, right?
Mm,
Guilt actually comes from within. And guilt is a certain belief that we have formed that might or might not be true. So those are those two things that I feel you have to really overcome when you say no to people is shame and guilt. And a lot of time when you say yes to other people, saying no to yourself. So
yeah.
what I have learned is that I always say yes to myself. So then I learned to say no to other people because I think about when I say no, it's not about them, but it's about me,
Mm,
right? I
yeah.
say no to you because I'm sorry, I really don't have the capacity to handle
Yeah.
this right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a good point. It's like you would add that reason. It's almost like telling the person it's not about you at all, but my schedule is too packed. And on the receiving end, it makes me feel okay that you told me no because now I know the reason.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm gonna share quick things that just happened recently. There's this person that have been reaching out to me on Instagram, and we have connected through video chat like twice. And every time we connect, create conversations. And afterward, I don't feel like I look forward for another conversation. It's not
Mm,
because of that person, but because of the state of mind and the emotion that I was in. I just don't look for any conversation whatsoever. It's not just with that person. And last week, he was like, "Hey, Sally, what's your schedule like this week? I would like to connect with you again." And I didn't respond to him because I just don't want to. I didn't know how to say no. Like, it happens. Even though I have practiced saying no many times, there will still be times where I felt like, oh my gosh, I feel bad if I say no to this person because our conversations are so great and he's so kind. He sent me his book and stuff. And I laid in bed for 2 hours. I couldn't sleep until 4:30 AM one night, just tossing and turning, anxiety. And the next day, I was like, "Why do I have to think so hard about saying no to
mm,
this person?" So then I realized that because I care about this person. That's why it bothers me
mm,
so much. And then the second thing is I just took a deep breath and I texted this person. I was like, "Hey, this is what's happening. I just don't have the capacity for another conversation." And then I thought this person would be like, "Oh, you're just so full of yourself," right? Nope. He came back so kind. He's like, "Oh, I understand. No worries. I want our conversations to be uplifting and joyful for you, not
wow.
anxiety and stressful." So then it
Wow.
really tells me, well, saying no in the right way, in a kind
Yeah.
way, is really going to help you reduce a lot of
Yeah.
stress and anxieties.
Yeah. Yeah. And I would even go to say that your relationship with that friend of yours even heightened now because it's almost like it created even more trust between you two. The fact that you said no.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's the crazy thing.
Yeah.
We think we're people pleasing or it sounds good to the other person by saying yes when we're being untruthful to ourselves. But when we're truthful to ourselves, it even creates an even better relationship, which is counterintuitive to our minds as people pleasers.
Yes, because what I thought about it is, what if this person got mad at me, right? Then they're not
Mm.
the right person for my crowd, and I save a lot more time, right?
Mm.
But if this person is understanding, now this is somebody I want to
Mm.
keep. in my life.
That's awesome. Sometimes I do the same too. I'm like, I would ghost them and I'm like, they would invite me and it would take me a while to like think of a good, response of how I can respond to them with a good reason and still being truthful to myself. And then, and then as I sit there longer, I'm like, oh, well, ghosting doesn't feel as good anymore. So I would force myself to like, okay, you got to answer them. You cannot ghost them anymore, which I would do before. So I totally understand. It's like, it's still a work in progress. Like no matter how much we share of how we overcame stuff, there's still situations that we're gonna be like, I'm not too sure, and then the old pattern will come back.
Yeah, and then I also want to ask you is that the reason you give them, is it an excuse that you made up or is it really the real reason?
Mm. So one time, my friend, she came in from out of town and we were supposed to meet like Saturday night sometime, but we didn't have a fixed time. And so she finally texted me. I think she was already out in downtown and said, hey, meet us in downtown in 1 hour. And it was pretty late. It was probably 7, 8 p.m. And like, I'm like, by that time, like already trying to wind down for bed. And I'm like, I get into my antisocial mode. So I'm like,
Yeah.
oh goodness, this is like kind of late. And so I kind of sat there on my couch looking at my phone, like, how do I respond? How do I respond? And then I just like came up with, hey, how about we meet tomorrow at this hour? And so it was just like, I didn't really give them a reason of why I didn't want to meet them. It was just, I gave them an alternative and it felt good for me. And we just kind of, the conversation just shifted to, okay, where can we find a better time? So it was just like, I was still being truthful to myself. I didn't want to go out that night, but we're working on a solution of how we can fix that. So that's how I fixed it. And so, yeah, that's another different way of how you can approach that if you do want to say no.
That's really good. Have you ever
Yeah.
experienced time where you're supposed to meet some of your friends, right? Or let's say you got to meet a girlfriend for dinner and you plan that for 2 weeks already. And the day before, you're like, "Ah, I really don't feel like
Yep.
going." And you were about to text them, hey, could we please reschedule? Have you ever
Uh-huh.
experienced that part where before you text them, they're like, hey, I'm so sorry, Suzanne, could we
Yeah.
reschedule? Like they come and say it first before you even
Yeah.
get to say it. And you're like, oh, yeah, sure, of course.
Sure, why not? Actually, this morning, so on Monday mornings when I wake up, I'm kind of like groggy and I kind of like it takes me a little while longer to get back into the work mode. And so this morning I was like kind of half awake and I'm like, oh, we have a recording at 10 a.m. I'm like, should I reschedule with Sally? And I'm like, no, it's gonna be fun. And so I went into like my purpose and my reason of comparing the canceling versus doing it. And the more I thought of it, it was like, oh, the more pleasure came into the recording side because I'll actually have a good conversation with Sally and then it will uplift me, to start the week. But it was definitely stuff that's still going on in my mind. And I think what I did this morning was I just compared, the pain and the pleasure of the pain was, okay, we have to reschedule, we have to find another time during the week. And then the pleasure was like, no, I get to start my week in a different way than I normally do. Maybe I didn't have as much time for myself this morning, but then we'll have a good conversation. So that's how I did it this morning.
That's really good. I often feel
Yeah,
the same as you. I often like, oh, I don't feel like doing it.
yeah,
I want to reschedule.
yeah,
But we kind of rescheduled this like twice already.
yeah. I think it goes back to, and it's okay. It's like I think I'm an introvert, and like I enjoy my me time a lot, a lot. So it does take me like some mental preparation, to get into the social mode, what I call it. But once I get into it, like I love interacting with people and getting to know them more. So
Yeah, yeah. I agree with you. Same with me. I'm such an
yeah,
introvert, just like you. I would rather last night I asked my husband, like, "Do you wanna hang out?" And he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna fold clothes and watch some movie." And then I was like, "I don't wanna watch movie." That's what I said. "I'm just gonna read
yeah,
my book in my room."
yeah.
But I did came down to the basement and hung out with him and ended up we
Mm.
watched the movie, and he was really appreciative because a lot of time for me, I think I just wanna do this
Mm.
because that's my plan,
Yeah.
right? But when we say this is saying yes now, when we say yes to the person that actually care and love us a lot,
Mm.
we get to connect with their energy and kind of flow with them. And you're like,
Mm.
oh, this is not too bad.
Yeah. That's true. That's true. I totally understand. And it goes back to like the tribe that we want to put ourselves with, that not everybody has that kind of energy that would energize us. And so somebody who's really loving and caring, like your husband, even though you may want your me time, but then just having that connection kind of brings it a different way of energizing yourself too.
Mhm.
I totally feel that sometimes with my friend. They will call me and I'm like, no, I don't want to talk at this time. Like, I'll call you back later. And then once I do talk to them, it feels good. So it's just like balancing for us as introverts, that time of me time, and then balancing the need for connection because like we cannot cut out the connection time.
Yeah, I think this is off topic a little bit because we're talking about introverts, right?
Yeah.
Like when I'm in the middle of something and somebody calls me, I just don't pick up because
Yeah.
it disrupt me and it actually caused me a little anxiety in the body,
Mhm.
right? My mind is strong enough to go forward, but my body is like, heck, I was
Yeah.
having peace.
Yeah.
And then I actually like, call me later.
Yeah.
And
That's a good point.
then I finish what I was doing, take a breather, and then I call them back, right? But
Yeah.
then I
Yeah. I do the
rarely
same.
call people right away. I pick up people's call right away
Yeah.
because I'm
Yeah.
usually in the middle of something.
Yeah, I do the same. And that's a good point because that's another example of how to say no, quote unquote, to somebody, but still respect and say yes to yourself. I love that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So I hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I definitely had a lot of fun sharing our stories. I feel like we got into a pretty good and fun topic here at the end about introverts. So if you guys are interested about us talking more, how does introverts react in the world or live in the world, let us know in the comments, and then we can make up more stories to share with you guys. Because I'm sure we have plenty more.
Yeah, sounds good. It would be fun to learn how introverts run businesses and be
That's
an
true.
entrepreneur, right?
Yeah, that's true. Any closing comment
Um,
for us, Sally?
I feel like every time we have this conversation, it is not only comforting to me knowing another sister went through the same thing and growing herself, it also give me a lot of hope that more and more people out there could
Mhm.
be using our experience as strength to grow their own self and decide, hey, it stops here. I'm going to change this going forward. And my next generation is not going to receive the same conditioning traumas that I had, right? That courage that
Yeah.
we could provide just by sharing our stories. That's what I love about this
Mm.
episodes.
Yeah, me too. That's super powerful. We're just here to show you what's possible, and I feel like some of these stuff we doesn't get discussed often enough, or sometimes in passing in friends, like we don't even get to this level of conversation. So I'm super grateful for you that we can share these insights at
Mhm.
this level of depth. So thank you, Sally.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Suzanne.
Thank you guys. We will see you guys at the next episode. I'm sure we'll have more stories for you guys. And leave a like and subscribe to this channel if you want more content like that. And we'll see you guys next time.
Bye.
Bye.